We're here, we're queer, and we love the Lord. That's right, you're listening to Coming Out Christian, a podcast about life at the intersection of queer identity and Christian faith. This fun, faithful, and sometimes irreverent podcast is a production of Love Boldly, an Ohio-based nonprofit creating spaces where LGBTQIA+ people can flourish in Christianity. I'm one of your hosts, Siobhan Boyd Nelson, and my co-host is the Reverend Dr. Ben Hillscamp, Executive Director of Love Boldly. So join us, and let's find out who's coming out today. Well, hello there, Ben.
Hello, Siobhan. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
It's great to see you again, and I have a question for you.
Okay.
So I was reading something and a couple articles popped up, maybe something on Reddit. I'm not supposed to admit that I use Reddit, but I do. And there were these articles talking about how people are not using the dating apps anymore. So like Match.com and Tinder, their paid subscriber numbers are falling and like have been over the past 6 months. And that just got me to thinking because here I'm an old and I have never used a dating app, meaning that dating apps existed when I was in my dating phase, but like 45-year-old divorcees used dating apps when I was in my 20s. But you are young. And so I was wondering, do you have experience with dating apps? And if so, has your usage gone down like so many others?
Well, first off, let's just remember that you and I are only, I think, at most 7 years difference in age.
But that was a big period of time for dating apps. Like things changed drastically.
Yes, but I just want to clarify to everyone that the difference between old and young here are not even a decade, I don't think.
Yeah. But also you're a gay man. And so I just have to say that gay men and queer women have different relationships with dating apps.
Yes, definitely. And that was actually going to be my very next point. You're exactly right. Dating apps within our community, tend to focus more, or at least be used more by gay men.
Mm-hmm.
And we could probably break that down by other identities as well. I have definitely used dating apps in the past, with some success on OkCupid, although I'm not even sure OkCupid still exists. I will. I'm thanking God that my congregation is very progressive, as is Love Boldly, because I have to admit that the app that I have probably used the most is Grindr.
But
and also, I can say for a fact, I can say categorically that there are other progressive clergy folks and closeted clergy folks for that reason also using Grindr.
Yes.
We have to remember that when the most recent GOP National Convention happened, they literally took down Grindr by how much they were using it. So, it's not just openly queer folks. But yes, I've used several different dating apps. My usage really hasn't changed necessarily. That may have to do more with the fact that I'm an introvert as well. And that, meeting someone or talking to someone online is still more comfortable for me than going up to someone in person, whether that be, that could be a church or a bar. It doesn't really matter. Engaging with someone, at least initially over essentially text, still feels more natural, still feels safer than engaging with someone face to face, at least to start.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I just have a fascination with dating apps generally. Because, I've worked for more than half my career in the community. So, very aware of how big of a role the dating apps kind of play within the community and within the dating culture, but then also having never used one in my life. So it's just kind of like this thing I don't understand, but also has so much power. It's amazing.
Well, one other thing I will say about dating apps at least the ones that I've used, and at least here in Ohio, Central Ohio, I've seen far more people using these that are non-binary, that are
Mm,
transgender, that are gender expansive,
mm-hmm.
etc., than very clearly delineated, cis gay, cis lesbian, um, which in my experience has typically been the two crowds that
Yeah.
use those apps, or cis bi, cis folks, lesbian, gay, bi. So that's definitely been something I've seen, particularly among younger people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it actually surprises me a little bit that some are seeing a lot less traffic, because haven't necessarily seen less traffic from my perspective. It's just been a different type of traffic.
Got it. Well, I hope anyway that they don't go away completely because the introverts, oh my gosh, like you got to have a safe, comfortable way to meet people. So save the apps. The introverts need to date too. Yay. All right, so enough of dating apps, or maybe we're going to get into more of dating apps. We'll see. It is time to introduce our amazing guest for this episode, and I'm very excited. Ben has said wonderful, amazing things about this guest and has definitely whet my appetite. Jon Carl Lewis has studied theology, scripture, discernment, and ethics at Princeton Theological Seminary, Harvard Divinity School, and General Theological Seminary. He advocates for individual and communal human flourishing from a queer Christian contemplative perspective, inviting transformative conversations at the intersections of sexuality, spirituality, and joyful justice making. Oh, I love that phrase, joyful justice making. John
Ooh, I'm glad
Carl.
you do.
Jon Carl is the author of Seven Steps Towards Sexual Peace of Mind for the Queer Christian and But What About Sex? Thank you so much, Jon Carl, for being here as our guest today, and welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. Although I must give a shout out to my current seminary from which I will actually graduate, which is Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary. Um, uh, I love that place and the people there, and I have learned so much about living fully into a liberative vision for the world for all people there than anywhere else.
Amazing. Well, that just sounds like fun in and of itself, but we
Oh, yes.
cannot start there. We have to start where we start with every guest. We have a question that we ask every guest, and then that is, could you share your testimony at the intersection of your faith identity and your queer identity? So, what's your story where those two identities intersect?
Okay, so the one that comes to mind is when I was in reparative therapy in my early 20s, and it obviously wasn't working. And I was obviously praying as much as I could. And like nobody wanted to have sex with me anyway, so that wasn't a problem. But I was agonizing, and I said, God, I really can't take this anymore. Um, I can't commit suicide because that's a sin. But would you do me the mercy of just taking me out?
Mm-hmm.
I'm done. I don't want to live like this, and I don't want to live a life without love. I don't, this is too much. And God said to me, it wasn't audible, but it wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
God said, "Well, you have things I want to work on, but wanting to have sex with men and wanting to be in a relationship with a man is not one of the things I have the most problem with."
Amen.
And then, of course, God didn't stop there,
Okay,
and
yes.
ah, and said, "Now, why don't you work on being honest?"
Ooh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, like,
Yeah.
God, that was frying pan into the fire.
Right. As it is so often, you go to God for one answer and you get thrown a bunch of other questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely relate to that experience, because I also went to God with essentially the same question. What you doing? Why am I here? Why don't you just take me out? Why'd you create me in the first place? And
Yes.
again, heard that voice of God, that true voice. And the voice said to me, well, who said you were an abomination? I didn't say that. And that was liberating. It was absolutely liberating. What did you do once you heard that? What was your next step? I mean, knowing that God was also challenging you in that moment as well. But if you were in reparative therapy, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you mean gay reparative therapy, meaning that
Yes.
you were sent to therapy to become an ex-gay,
Yes.
and you said that wasn't working. Where did that therapy process go from there? And then what was your relationship with the church moving forward?
Well, the quick answer was I stopped the reparative therapy. I was living in Princeton, New Jersey, and commuting to well, I wasn't commuting, but I was going into Manhattan every Friday night,
Mm-hmm.
sit in a room with all these guys trying to not be gay, and sitting there and looking at these men, and I'm sitting there with my little like job in finance, which was really boring, and there was a dancer there and a high power attorney and a theater producer. And I'm like looking around the room, and and when they tell their stories about how they've fallen, I'm like, ooh, that sounds a little fun. Maybe I need to spend a little bit more time like doing some of that,
Uh-huh.
and so that I have something to work with, because it wasn't working for me. I wasn't feeling repentance because I didn't have anything to repent for.
There you go. There you
And
go.
and it just struck me, going into Manhattan, how much I realized. I said to God, I said, okay, I will be celibate if you want me to be celibate,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to minister to the gay community because it's fabulous and I like these people.
Love that. Yeah.
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 Yeah, yeah, yeah. Many a gay person in service to the queer spiritual community started out with, I'm going to go help them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because this is my community, right? Who do you minister to? Who do you give to and feed but your own people? It makes a lot
Yeah,
of sense.
who's your heart go out to? I mean, this was the time I came out in, let's see, 87,
Okay.
actually. Told somebody else in 87. Um, and when I graduated, then I was pledged into the hotspot of the AIDS crisis.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I was in Princeton. The next place to go is Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
And 50% of the men in Manhattan who were gay had HIV when I came out.
Yeah.
And my biggest heartbreak was not really leaving my evangelical fundamentalist community. That was sad. I walked away from all my friends, everybody. And yet what hurt me was the black church, Cradle African Methodist Episcopal, in a church that my ancestors founded in 1864.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that church. They were lovely. They were lovely. But none of the black denominations would bury people with with HIV. They weren't
Right.
ordaining people. They weren't doing same. I mean, my goodness, ordain and same-sex marriage still not on their radar. Still in resolutions working through committee to this day.
Right. Yeah.
But when black churches would not bury the bodies of men who had died from AIDS, that was unspeakable. That was my split with that.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It if nothing else, it speaks to the value It speaks to how the church truly saw those individuals, and the fact that, burial is just one of those basic fundamental human rights, right? The right to dignity at the time of your death and to be buried with dignity. And the fact that Black churches could not, many churches could not bring themselves to offer that dignity to someone at the most vulnerable moment of your life, of your existence, says so much. And it is part of what has alienated that, maybe not that specific thing, but that attitude, that way of treating queer individuals within the Black church is what has led to so much disconnect, so much trauma that we're still dealing with 40 years later.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because even though I presume you and I know this pain of exile, people are. I often hear people saying now, "Why do queer people stay in the church?"
Yes, yes.
And when you talk to queer people who've stayed in the church or their allies or their family members, they put up with a lot and continue to. I believe that Black cis gay men, 60% of them still go to church.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
60%. Now, the numbers for people who are not Black is much lower.
Mm-hmm.
But, church for us was so much more than doctrine.
Right. It was
Um,
family. It was
it
community.
was family. And, I was born in 65. So church was helping us get through all of the horrors of being Black in America.
Right.
And church was at the forefront of our liberation.
Right.
And so when, they were doing what they were doing around AIDS, I took all those lessons I got and I just walked them over into the queer spiritual community.
There you go. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And where did you end up when you say the queer spiritual community of the 80s and 90s? Where did that leave you?
Well, I started attending. I got confirmed in the Episcopal Church in
Mm-hmm.
1990, and although there have been slight interruptions, um, I seem to still be worshiping at an Episcopal church now.
If it fits, then it fits. Yeah, yeah.
Well, what I love about it, and this has a lot to do with my developing theology of the erotic, um, is Catholic, small c Catholic worship is incredibly sensual, incredibly body based.
Mm-hmm.
You go in for communion, Eucharist, and you smell the incense if you're in the right place. You hear
Right.
the singing. You touch everyone's hand at the peace. You taste the wine, and hopefully, someone from the congregation didn't bake the communion bread.
I feel like that's an inside joke there because Ben laughed audibly. So Ben, was that an Episcopal
Uh,
joke there?
No, it's not necessarily a joke.
it's not a joke.
It just is a. I mean, just think about it. It's um. I, although I'm not sure where Jon Carl was going with it, but a little bit of an inside joke, but also just an observation in general.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
of who's preparing what and how and why and with which recipe.
Got it. Heard.
Yeah. There are approved recipes
Okay.
because what you don't want is little pieces of Jesus floating in the chalice. There,
Fair. That's I hadn't thought about that, but yes, that is true.
this is very in the weeds, but in high Anglicanism, you have a little silver spoon to get Jesus out.
Okay. I did not know
Yeah,
that. I'm learning so much. I've been learning so much since this conversation started here with you and Ben, Jon Carl. This is amazing.
yeah,
Jon Carl, you just so before we got on this call and before we started recording, Siobhan and I both knowing your background, particularly me knowing your background and knowing conversations you and I have had, and even I think we did a webinar or two
yeah.
together in the past. Um, but one of the things we were trying to say is, how are we going to get him to talk about sexual ethics, sex, and queer Christians? And you just started. You just brought up your theology around the erotic. So I wonder if you can comment a bit for our listeners about your work, perhaps not maybe not conclusions, but where you've gotten so far when it comes to talking about sex, sexual ethics, and the queer community, particularly within Christianity.
Okay, where I have arrived, and I literally started hearing this coming out of my mouth a week ago at the Reconciling Ministries Network convocation. These are the folks who fought for 40 years to get the harmful language taken out of the Book of Discipline of the United Methodist Church.
Mm-hmm.
And so we realized that a Methodist church sent me to Methodist seminary. Long story. We realized that all they did was take out the harmful language. And so we are now in this new era, and we're like, what do we do? And our trans folks are under siege. And what came to me literally over the days that I was there was this conviction that we as queer Christians need to lead the church in discussions about healthy sexuality that is justice oriented and leads to human flourishing. And I may have gotten a little bit evangelical. I was like, okay, this is no longer the time for we're just as good as. This is no longer the time for please let us in.
Mm-hmm.
This is no longer the time for we're like everybody else. Just don't ask us what happens in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Because, even though, and especially for trans people, the issue for them is not who they have sex with necessarily, but when a queer person is talking to a non-affirming person, while we're saying we're not just about the sex, we're about more than that, in the back of the mind, they're wondering whether we're top or bottom, who plays the man or woman, because their sense of sexuality is so impoverished.
Ooh, yes.
It is impoverished that they cannot imagine anything out of the box. And I will say the box they have been forced into.
Yep.
Jon Carl, I agree with this so much. Often my wife and I get into these theological discussions or discussions about the church. And one of the conclusions that we've come to is that the church, particularly the Black church, just has a problem with sex. Like we
Yeah.
can't even get to the problem that the Black church has with queer people
Right.
because the Black church has not yet dealt with its very foundational issues with sex and particularly female sexuality.
Ooh, ooh.
Now, and I say that as a little Black girl who grew up in a Black church. And
Oh,
for some reason, and it's horrible, it reminds me of that Madonna whore complex. When a
yes.
little Black girl starts developing, goes through puberty, turns about 11 or 12, all of a sudden she's fast.
Yes.
And I escaped the fast label because I didn't go through puberty. until I was about 17 or 18, right? So I wasn't where all the other girls were, so I wasn't fast, right? But somehow how these young women were developing physically had implications on their moral character. And I saw those implications playing out in the way that those young women were being treated by the church at such a
Yes.
vulnerable time in their lives.
By women. By
Yes.
women. My aunt, I loved her dearly. And I remember her going up behind girls in the summertime and draping a shawl over their shoulders.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That modesty shawl.
That modesty shawl.
Oh, you never had a room full of 100 people looking out for one tiny girl's modesty.
Right. Well, modesty and okay, so Siobhan, I'm not going to who was looking at that young woman and who the modesty shawl was to keep the
Protect.
eyes off of.
Right. And who was that modesty actually protecting? Was it protecting that young woman or was it harming her? And who was actually being protected? I think is one of the big questions that we always have in this house. But
Well, what they need to do is take that modesty shawl and wrap it around the face of the pastor.
there we go. There we go. You close your eyes. Don't make it. Yeah. If you got a problem with what you're seeing, you close your eyes.
You look away.
You look away. Yes. And that is not the way that the Black church has historically dealt with that issue that I want to say very clearly all churches deal with. I mean, we're seeing this from, Roman Catholic to evangelical churches across the spectrum. All churches deal with this.
They all do.
And it's a matter of the fact that we have not gotten clear on sex and what
Right.
role sex plays in a holy life. And the fact that sex can play a role and has a role, a biblical, theologically sound role in a holy life.
Yes. 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 And it's funny, I'm coming back to what you're saying about. I mean, because this was my conviction. It's like why I believe the queer community, those of us who can, need to lead on issues of sexuality. Those of us who can and are educated,
Mm-hmm.
is because the non-queer world, and I don't think that's a whole lot of people, um, needs our liberation.
Yeah.
They need us more than we need them.
Whew. Yes.
And I've been I'm currently executive director interim of Jonathan's Circle, which is a nonprofit founded by an Episcopal priest um, that helps men integrate their sexuality and their spirituality in community.
Wow. Okay.
And most of the guys are men who have an interest in men, not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But the deeper I go into this work, and the more I look at when I go to the locker room, that's my field laboratory site.
Okay.
I have a good friend who says, did you go to your field laboratory site this morning? And I look at the postures and I see the way men react and I hear them talk in a way that I wouldn't otherwise.
Right.
And very often I leave and I'm like, damn, they need some help.
Mm. Mm.
They
You
need
can
some help.
you can tell there's repression there, like by body language and
Well,
things they're actually saying.
there's repression, and there's also there was one guy in the gym this morning. I fully believe he's totally hetero, but really fixated on his appearance.
Mm.
manscaping like a gay man.
Okay.
And I had the sense today that he wasn't really threatened by homosexuality so much as terribly insecure about how his body was perceived in the world.
Yeah. Got it. Which we're
I
seeing
saw,
more of, is what I'm
which is
hearing.
more and more and more of. There was like I mean, may have been in college, young guy, um, beautifully buff body, um, willing to show off all his chest muscles and arms and everything like that. And he was across the way from me in the locker room, um, wrapped a towel around himself to take off his shorts. He was standing next to his friend to take off his shorts and then put other shorts, underwear and shorts back on. And I was like, oh, hell no. And I restrained myself. And I said, how did you learn how to do that? And
That
for
took
him, it
some
was second
practice.
nature. Evidently, he'd been doing this all his life.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't help myself. And I said, yeah, well, if I had done that in the locker room with my coach around, he would have called me all sorts of names
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
being shy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, John, I have a question for you, Jon Carl. What has been the response of the church? And I'm saying, I guess, big C church, institutional, but also smaller churches that you've interacted with to this idea of, and I know this is a pretty recent idea, but the whole idea of sexual ethics that goes beyond what the church is usually willing to talk about. I mean, you've written a book that says 7 steps towards sexual peace of mind for the queer Christian. How do our churches open to understanding that there is peace of mind for the queer Christian, or that there is a way to get there, or are you still coming up against some backlash, some purity culture kind of stuff?
Well, it's strange where the backlash comes from. And by the way, those books were pamphlets. I may
Oh,
have called them,
okay.
but I really do feel a need to reissue them. I want to have them available by maybe Wild Goose,
Hmm.
um, after Wild Goose, because um, people keep not writing the things I want to read books on.
That's a good
Um,
reason to write. Yes.
yeah. Uh, is that Toni Morrison? But anyway, um, the churches are interesting. The churches that listen, I haven't been on a whole lot of churches, but the ones I have spoken to have been really, really intrigued.
Mm,
Um, Even like places like I led a retreat for Rutgers chaplains.
okay.
Um, and I just mentioned in passing that I did this work because I've been keeping this light under a bushel.
Mm,
And they were interested in that. What I find is like when this gets mentioned, that's what people want to talk about.
right. Okay.
And so like even at Wild Goose, it's like Wild Goose is a progressive theology camp for folks who are trying very hard to be progressive with
Okay.
beer.
With always with beer. Why not with
Always with
beer?
beer.
Yes.
But the Christian leaders are very, very hungry to have these conversations.
Mm, that's encouraging.
Yeah, and I say I've kept my light under a bushel. I realized something recently. My mother passed away peacefully
I'm so
about a month
sorry.
ago.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the roller coaster several years before was the hard part, but the last 6 months we really got to a good place with each
Hmm.
other, and that I thank God for every moment. Yet when she passed and we did the funeral, I realized you haven't posted your work on Facebook because you didn't want mom to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
You haven't been doing the work on this because you knew your mother would be severely, severely upset
Mm-hmm.
by my doing this work. And, and God said, hey, your mother has her reward.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
don't you get to work?
Okay. God likes to ask you hard questions. And I'm saying that as someone who also gets very hard questions. And I think God just likes to ask us all hard questions.
Well, if you listen, I mean, why why are people afraid to sit in silence before God? Because you have no idea what he's going to come up with,
Or you
what they are going
do.
to come up
Or
with. I'm
you,
trying to go with they.
yes.
Um,
Okay. Yes. Yes. That's that sounds liberating and daunting at the
yes,
same time.
yes.
Um, and I think, just focusing on taking that light out from under the bushel, what does that look like for you moving forward?
Well, at the Reconciling Ministries Network conference, um, I found myself in telling all the pastors, I want to come preach in your church.
Okay.
And I had this whole like little gig set up called Rent a Profit. And I said, what you do is this. You need a break. You need to take time off. You
Mm-hmm.
need to leave your pulpit empty some Sunday, or not empty. You invite me to come, and I might give a little workshop the day before,
Right.
and then I preach a sermon, a liberative sermon, a prophetic sermon about all the social justice issues and how they're tied to the erotic.
Okay.
I pick up my check, I leave, and then about Sunday afternoon, you're going to start getting phone calls.
I was just going to say, Jon Carl, are you setting those pastors up
Yes!
though?
Yes! No, 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 no. It's for their good. It's for their good.
Okay. Okay.
So they're going to get the phone call, and I say, and what you will say is, oh my goodness, I had no idea he was going to say all that. I'll never have him back again.
Ooh, but it
And
popped the
but
cork
then
on the
but
conversation.
but then the conversation is open for you to steer.
Yes.
It is dangerous for a pastor to get up in the pulpit and say the things I do. I might say about capitalism, about race, about all these things. There are third rails um, during lockdown. I was running into shocked pastors who had lost either half their congregations
Mm-hmm.
or were thrown out for saying things like, I think the Black Lives Matter folks have a point.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were losing their churches.
Mm-hmm.
So I really do recognize that the gospel is not safe for most pastors to preach.
Mm. That's a word right there. Yeah. So you're giving you want to start the conversations. You're willing to be the person who takes the risk in order
Yes,
to get the conversation started.
yes. And my spiritual director and master's advisors say I protest way too much. But
So did Jesus.
so Jesus, but I have a good friend who recognizes that when I say, I will never, and then it's often followed by pastor or congregation. Um, I will never work for the institutional church. And they like just sit back and they look at their watch. Um,
Yeah, I used to say that too.
I
Same
know
here.
most of
Same
us
here.
did.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the good ones did. We don't go rushing into this unless we have to. Um, but I lost my train of thought. But the I would like to shape conversations that can only happen in the study group. That can only happen in the workshop. That can only happen when the bureaucracy of the denomination is not watering it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm coming to find that my real heart is for um, pastors um, who want a place to talk about sexuality, their own sexuality,
It
because they
does
got
really
their
have to
own
start there.
stuff.
Yeah.
It does. You can't get up in front of people and talk about sex until you look at yourself. And when you get up in front of a congregation and you people and start talking about sex, many a time lecture on sexual ethics. I'm like, so how you doing on that?
Yeah. Yeah.
How about that you did?
Mm-hmm.
And they'll bring up stuff from like years ago.
Right. Right.
So you gotta know. You gotta know. And so I want to be setting up some products where I want to after Wild Goose I want to set up a 4-week conversation with men, and we will gather as men who are spiritual leaders, and I will lead them in talking about their erotic lives and how that fits into who they are as spiritual beings. So bring the theology, bring Jesus,
Yeah.
and bring your genitals and your heart.
Whew, I kind of love it. Ben, I love alliteration. Bring Jesus and your genitals. Um,
Oh my God, I'm writing that down.
it's going to catch somebody, right? That's going to catch somebody's attention. But John Carl, I'm so excited to hear those types of plans because that type of liberation, the opportunity for liberation that embodies, is so the potential for that to trickle down. I'm not talking, Reaganomics,
Yeah.
but the ability, for others to become liberated because they are led by a liberated person. That excites me to no end.
Yeah, and let me trickle down and bubble up.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, because, I really believe that when I was at the Reconciling Ministries Network convocation, I was looking around the room and I was sitting on a panel with a bishop
Mm-hmm.
and a theologian. Both of them were black,
Mm-hmm.
and a trans person who's a pastor, and Christian education leaders, and people who make the church regular. I'm like, damn, why are we trying to get into the Methodist church? We need to form our own.
Whew. Yeah.
What did Jesus' followers do?
They
They
formed their
got
own.
together and they gave mutual aid.
Mm-hmm.
They got together and they had dinner together. They got together and they prayed and they sang and they didn't wait for anybody because there
Right.
wasn't anybody.
Yes.
And they did that for 100, 200 years.
Mm-hmm.
When was the apostle going to come through town? Never.
For most
Sisters had
towns.
to,
Yeah.
sisters had to do it for themselves. And that was the genius of Methodism. And I think we need to think about that again.
Okay.
Where do we do the body of Christ
Yep.
for ourselves?
Yeah. Where do we find the church? You're hearkening back to a conversation that we just recorded with one of our guests about finding where is the church and being the church in community and every day. This harkens back to one of our pride questions of, where do you find church as a queer individual, and the fact that we are able to create and find church in so many places outside of big C church, and that's important. That's not something. It's not just a stopgap measure. I think if what I'm hearing you say and what I'm hearing other people say, that's not just a stopgap measure. That's a good thing. That's the way to live life. That's finding church in community is where we should be finding church.
Well, we need community in general in this country right now.
Yeah.
I read a book that chilled me about a year ago. Um, the church finds its mission and its power when civilization falls apart.
It does. Yep. And it makes
That's
sense.
that's when the church regroups. That's when the church does its work. I think we need to be ready. We may have to save the world again.
Uh, with Jesus's help, with by the grace of God, by the
Only by the grace of God.
Amen. Amen. Jon Carl, I think we could sit here and talk to you for just hours on end, but I want to be respectful of your time and know that we are probably going to ask you to come back and share some more with us, especially as you continue to develop, what did you call it? Theology of the erotic?
An erotic theology, a
Mhm.
theology of the erotic. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Well,
such a,
definitely.
it's such a
And
beautiful
Ben, you
thing.
you have a pulpit, don't you? In
I
Ohio,
do.
I know I
I
can get
do.
to Ohio.
Uh-oh. There we go.
Just let me know when, and just bear in mind that we don't have much money as a congregation, but let me know when.
All right.
I'm all about giving Ben a break too. Go take vacation, Ben.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
All right, so we are going to close out our episode with our final two segments. The first one is the query of the day. Yes, I did say query. And based upon our amazing conversation with Jon Carl, um, I want to get folks' thoughts, input on what would be a theology of the erotic. Like, what questions does that raise for you individually, right? What questions would you ask your pastor about sex and sexual ethics if you could, if the church were a safer space for having those kinds of conversations? Sounds like Jon Carl is going to be sparking those conversations. I'd love to get that conversation sparked in our comments as well. What questions would you ask about sex and sexual ethics? Sound good, Ben? I'm excited about these comments. I really hope people let us know what they're thinking.
Definitely, definitely.
All right, and then our second segment of every episode is our moment in queer Christian history. This is when we remember that not only have we always been here, we have always been here in the church. What you got for us today, Ben?
So, having done some of our more recent moments in queer Christian history, focused on the last 100 years or so, I'm going to turn all the way back to the third century, the 200s, for the relationship and the martyrdom of Saints Sergius and Bacchus. Saint Sergius and Bacchus were both Roman soldiers who converted to Christianity at a time when Christianity was not yet the religion of the Roman Empire. They were martyred because of that. Um, but they are all almost always in iconography portrayed together. They're usually portrayed as two very physically fit, kind of muscular hunk types of guys. Um, they are often considered, particularly by queer Christians, to have been lovers. Um, Obviously, we're talking about two people who lived, 1,800 years in the past at a very different time with very different standards of what was considered to be what we would call homosexual or queer. But they're often portrayed, often thought of as lovers, much in the same way that people consider um, Jonathan and David to have been lovers, and more than just kind of brothers or brothers in arms, but to actually have been romantic lovers. Um, and I wanted to choose this one again before knowing exactly where our conversation with Jon Carl would go, but these two often represent that very masculine but also very deeply loving and romantically loving of two men in a very particular situation. In this case, again, having been soldiers, having converted to Christianity, and then being martyred to about the same time as each other.
Amazing, Ben. Always just giving us all the knowledge. Love that one. Pulling from before there even was the church. Amazing. Well, I want to say thank you again to our wonderful guest, Jon Carl Lewis. Jon Carl, will you share the name of the nonprofit where you are right now again?
You won't believe this. The name of the organization is Jonathan Circle.
There we go. Bringing it all back full circle. Yeah.
Jonathan Circle, no apostrophe.org.
Wonderful. And is there anything that you would like to promote or any social media that you would like to share? This episode will be released on October 5th.
October 5th. Yeah, I would like to plug the Q Christian Fellowship Conference.
Oh, yeah.
You do not have to be a spiritual leader. And I will probably be there. I will either be talking on stage or I will be talking everybody's ears off in the hallways. So come find me.
Amazing. Look for Jon Carl at that event, and look for us again next Sunday because we're going to be here. It was amazing seeing you, Ben. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to like, share, subscribe, tell everyone about it, particularly this episode. It's a good one. And we'll see you next time on Coming Out Christian.
Thank you for listening to Coming Out Christian with Siobhan Boyd Nelson and me, Ben Hillscamp. Do you want to see content like this continue to be produced? Then please support Love Boldly with a donation and consider becoming a monthly donor. You can donate online at www.loveboldly.net/donate. Join us next time as we continue to engage with people who proudly say that we're here, we're queer, and we love the Lord. And we're not going anywhere.